أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم والذين كفروا وكذبوا بآياتنا أولئك أصحاب النار خالدين فيها وبئس المصير ما أصاب من مصيبة إلا بإذن الله ومن يؤمن بالله يهدي قلبه والله بكل شيء عليم. As to those who disbelieve and belie our signs, they are the companions of the fire, wherein they shall abide forever, and a most woeful destination it is. So the consequence of disbelief and dying upon disbelief is to forever be in the fire of Jahannam. And many times now, people would ask, why is it that one action could make someone live in the fire forever? Or if you look at it technically, even the kufr of the kafir, the disbelief of the disbeliever in this world is temporary, right? If you think about it, they'll disbelieve for 60 years, 70 years until they live and then die upon that. Then why do they get punishment for eternity? And that goes back to many reasons, but one of the most important reason being that this is belief, right? Belief is something that's not supposed to change. So if you die on something that you had the chance to believe something else, but you died on what you believe, right? The idea of belief, even when we talk about it, we say don't change your beliefs for people, go after your beliefs, right? A belief is something that a person goes after, a person chases. A belief is something which is supposed to be a higher purpose in life, right? So if a person chased after kufr and their way to live was kufr and they didn't change that, even though they had the many years, then that was the belief which was forever, right? So they're given the opportunity is always there. However, right, if the choice is at the end of the day, the choice is in the hands of a person, that what do they want their belief to be, right? So for that reason, belief is not something that is necessarily measured by time, because belief is something supposed to stay, right? So if a person were to have lived more, they would remain on their belief, right? So belief is for that reason, right? And it's also known that Allah Azza wa Jal tests people in the grave as well as in the hereafter, whomsoever He wants to test as well, to decide on where they shall be. The next ayah Allah Azza wa Jal says, "Ma asaba min musibatin illa bi idnillah." Not a single affliction strikes, but that it is from illa bi idnillah, except that it is from by the permission of Allah. Right? So nothing can take place except by the will of Allah. Musibah, difficulties and tests and trials also take place by the will of Allah. And musibah can come in the form of khair, in goodness. It can also come in the form of shar, of something evil. But you could say dominantly that in this ayah, Allah Azza wa Jalla wants us to bring our attention towards the times when we are tested in difficulty. Because the word musibah is used here. Illa bi idnillah, وَمَن يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ يَهْدِ قَلْبَهُ. Yet whoever believes in Allah, Allah shall guide his heart. He shall guide his heart. So what Allah Azza wa Jal wants us to do is that when we are tested with musibah, when we are tested with anything, that we bring and remind ourselves of Allah, that we bring Allah Azza wa Jal into everything. So for example, the Sahaba, even if they needed salt, or even if they were missing a lace to their sandal or shoe, that they would make dua first, and then they would do whatever they needed to do. Right? Action needs to be done as well. Right? The point being that a person must have tawakkul, and true tawakkul is that a person always keeps Allah Azza wa Jal in mind throughout what they're doing. And tawakkul is not that a person does tawakkul at some point, then you do action. Action is not separate from tawakkul. Right? Doing something which what we would call in our haqq, our favorite tadbir, right? Planning and doing, executing plan. This is not opposite of tawakkul. This is a part of tawakkul. Right? The hadith, when we say, a lot of times people, they mention the hadith that, tie your camel, i'qilha wa tawakkal, tie your camel and have tawakkul. Number one, a lot of times people mention this in light of uh, the emphasis that of doing, when that's not necessarily the case here. Number one. Number two, a lot of people translate it as tie your camel then have tawakkul. It's not then have tawakkul, it's and have tawakkul. And wow does not differentiate in any way between zaman. Right? This should be a known factor. Right? This is why Sharh al-Hadith, commentary of Hadith, requires understanding of language. Tying the camel, watawakkal, meaning not fatawakkal, right? Not thumma tawakkal, watawakkal. That while you're tying your camel, you're supposed to have tawakkul. Meaning, while you're tying your camel, you're supposed to remember that I'm tying it, but at the end of the day, only Allah is going to keep this camel tied. Only Allah will keep this camel in its place. I'm putting my laces in my shoe, but this is only happening at the end of the day because Allah is doing it. I'm working in the day and money's coming. This is the biggest test for us. Money's coming, I'm feeding my family, but that is only happening because Allah is wanting it to happen. That is only happening because Allah is permitting for it to happen. So that is what Allah Azza wa Jalla wants us to do, that in every scenario, in every situation that we are in, that we bring Allah Azza wa Jalla in that point in our lives. We bring Allah Azza wa Jalla in our lives. Right? So وَمَن يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ يَهْدِ قَلْبَهُ. The one who has this iman, that Allah will guide his heart. Now this is a very interesting ayah which has to do with musibah, because Allah Azza wa Jal is connecting musibah with the heart. Right? Because tests are one thing, but withstanding the test is a separate thing. Right? So and you can break it down into things. There's the scenario, the test, there is the person, and then there's the thoughts of the person. Those are all separate things. The thoughts are connected to the heart. So how the person, what is called perception, how the person perceives this bala, this test, this musibah, is a separate part of the musibah, is a separate part of the test. Right? And this is the area within where most people would not have the ability, because Allah Azza wa Jal does not ever burden a person with more than they can carry. So no musibah would come upon a person, except that if they were to be steadfast, that they would have the ability to cope with it. So part of this being iman does have a connection with a person's ability to cope with masa'ib, with tests. Because Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَمَن يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ يَهْدِ قَلْبَهُ. Whoever believes in Allah. This is why we would not believe today in a form of therapy or counseling without iman. And this is why that even in counseling and therapy, right, if the counselor or therapy is teaching you a way to stay away from your troubles, or to be distracted from your troubles without going to Allah, if any person teaches you in that way, then that will create other problems. That will create other problems. Right? So the first step to dealing with musibah is turning to Allah. Right? Now that doesn't mean that you're only going to turn to Allah and the musibah will be taken away. That's not tawakkul. Tawakkul is not that a person only makes dua. Tawakkul is not that a person only prays their salah. Tawakkul, a part of that is doing it. This is why the ulama would say that using the asbab is ainu tawakkul. It is tawakkul. Right? Not because you know that these things are going to give you the result that you're looking for, but because Allah created the world in a way that Allah wants human beings to use things to get to a result. Now if you look at, for example, shifa, which is cure. Cure comes from Allah. But Allah Azza wa Jal comes in hadith as well. Rasulullah said, ما أنزل الله داء إلا أنزل له دواء. That there isn't a illness that Allah Azza wa Jal has sent except that Allah Azza wa Jal has sent a cure for it. So the shurah, the commentators in the hadith mention that now it is upon Banu Adam, the children of Adam, to search for that cure. Right? Now, for example, when Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam told people to take honey and that cured, right? And the person took it once, it didn't cure. Then he took it a second time, it didn't cure. Then he took it a third time and it cured. What this story teaches us, for example, and others the like, is that, and specifically yani, in relations to medicine, which is that cure does not have to come from a particular process necessarily. Right? Cure will come wherever Allah Azza wa Jal places it. We search for that, and we may find it in one place, we may find it in another. Why is it important to have this mindset? To look for halal alternatives in medicine, right? Because in the modern framework of medicine, at least, right, there isn't a bioethical standard of halal, right? So not everything done is necessarily according to the best way that we would want in Sharia. And Sharia, yes, Sharia says that, at times when there's darura, there's great necessity, that even if something is necessarily against, the, something of the Sharia, it can be allowed. However, that's not the default that a Muslim framework of medicine would want to take. That's not the default framework, default pathway, right? You know, for example, when I was in a lecture of one of the ulama, and he was giving, a lecture regarding, medicine and bioethics, and he was talking about, for example, you have blood transfusions, right? Now, this is one, method of doing something which it takes place and it is needed and it's done, and ulama have given fatwa of jawaz for it for that reason. But keeping it, had a person, a researcher, kept in mind that blood is impure, right? Because, technically, according to the ulama, blood is impure, right? If blood gets on clothes, you have to clean it. That blood is impure, according to some of the ulama. Would that have changed the chain of thought that a researcher would have? Meaning that if researchers thought according to Sharia, how much would that affect their research? Right? So, yani, this is something important to keep in mind. So, tawakkul is not that a person only has iman, but it's that when they do, they invoke upon their iman throughout the process. They're remembering Allah. Throughout the process, they're doing what the next ayah will say, which is obeying Allah. The next ayah will say, Ati'u Allah, obey Allah, and obey the Messenger. That is how you get through masa'ib, through tests. So when when a person believes in Allah Azza wa Jal, Allah will guide their heart. So now, the guidance and strength that the heart needs, whether the person in poverty becomes rich or not, whether the person in illness becomes cured or not, whether the person of whatever test they're going through, that test stays or goes. If a person is given this hidayah to their heart, they'll be able to cope with it. They'll be able to handle it. Right? Which is why, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam himself, he said that I faced masa'ib more than any other person. There was no Nabi, no other person that faced tests that I faced. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, how did he handle all of those masa'ib? It was by turning to Allah Azza wa Jal, and then the light which Allah Azza wa Jal shed upon the heart of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam strengthened his heart. So his heart was able to bear. His heart was able to withstand. Wallahu bi kulli shay'in alim. And now the ending of this ayah is very important because it's attached to the entire ayah, that Allah is all-knowing of all things. So when you know Allah is all-knowing of all things, then you're not going to try to ask, why is this happening? Why did that happen? You're not going to try to understand and analyze every single thing, that why did it happen like this? Why? Because Allah knows. I can rely on Allah's knowledge. I don't need to know if I don't know. Right? So this is a part great. This connects to the tawakkul, which is that Allah knows everything. Right? Allah knows everything. Nothing besides Allah knows everything. So there's no need to rely on other things. No, is there need to be so worried. Need to be so worried or reliant on anything but Allah. Right? Allah is the one alone who knows everything. None but Allah. No one but Allah. Besides Allah knows. The next ayah Allah Azza wa Jalla says, وَأَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ. That obey Allah, وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ, and obey the messenger. Right? So now this is a part of it, that if you want that steadfastness, if you want to be able to go through the masa'ib, right, and come out in a healthy way, you will need to obey Allah and His messenger along the way. Obeying Allah Azza wa Jal and the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is a very important part of going through musibah, going through test. فَإِن تَوَلَّيْتُمْ, and if you turn away, فَإِنَّمَا عَلَى رَسُولِنَا الْبَلَاغُ الْمُبِينُ. If you turn away, then what is incumbent upon our Messenger is only the clear conveyance. Balagh al-Mubin refers to the clear conveyance of the message of La ilaha illallah. Rasulullah sallallahu, as the prophets, are responsible. Their wajib, their responsibility is only to propagate. Right? فَإِنَّمَا عَلَيْكَ الْبَلَاغُ وَعَلَيْنَا الْحِسَابُ. That your responsibility is only to propagate. وَعَلَيْنَا الْحِسَابُ. As for judging and taking the hisab of the people and asking them why didn't they believe, that is upon Allah Azza wa Jal. Allahu la ilaha illahu wa ala Allahi falyatawakkal al-mu'minun. Allah, there is no God but Him. Allahu la ilaha illahu. Allah, there is no God but Him. Wa ala Allahi falyatawakkal al-mu'minun. So upon Allah, let the believers rely. So this entire passage has to do with this tawakkul, that relying upon Allah Azza wa Jal. And yani this connects back to the beginning of the surah as well, which has to do with taqdeer, creation of the skies, creation of people, from you those who believe, from you those who disbelieve. You must rely on Allah Azza wa Jal. Right? You must rely on Allah Azza wa Jal. So tawakkul is, and we think it's something very simple, but it is one of the greatest branches of Iman, a very important branch of Iman, and requires a lot of time and contemplation, a lot of ilm, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of amal, a lot of practice as well, for a person to understand more what exactly is it that Allah Azza wa Jalla wants from us in our obligation to have tawakkul upon Him. So people of Iman have this quality, so we are people of Iman, so we need to bring this quality within us. Then Allah Azza wa Jalla says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِنَّ مِنْ أَزْوَاجِكُمْ وَأَوْلَادِكُمْ عَدُوًّا لَكُمْ فَاحْذَرُوهُ. Now the passage changes a little bit, but of course that's still connected with the entire surah. That, O you who believe, indeed among your spouses and your children are those who are enemies to you. When this ayah was revealed, it was revealed in the specific context of a Sahabi who wanted to migrate to Medina. One of the narrations mentioned he wanted to migrate to Medina Munawwara, and his family held him back. Right. And so then because of this ayah was revealed. That inna min azwajikum wa awladikum aduwwan lakum fahdharuhum. That indeed among your spouses and your children are those who are enemies to you, so beware of them. وَإِن تَعْفُوا وَتَصْفَحُوا وَتَغْفِرُوا فَإِنَّ اللَّهَ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Yet if you pardon and excuse and forgive, then indeed Allah is all forgiving and mercy giving. This is an extremely important ayah in understanding relationships in family. And that is that, one thing is that a person's family, that's a very clear answer. If a family opposes a person in a matter of Sharia, depending on the level of that matter in the Sharia, how should they respond? That's a much easier, perhaps, question. But Allah Azza wa Jal is pointing to something else, which is adu is somewhat of an opposer when there's some sort of, you know, there's something, adawa is not necessarily only that a person is when we use the word enemy, it's a very strong word, right? It's a very strong word, but it's referring to not only like an enemy, but smaller qualities of opposition, smaller qualities of competition, which happen between men and women specifically. Right? That sometimes that there are things that take place which cause indescribable types of difficulties between a husband and a wife, which makes understanding difficult for them. Right? And the solution for this is very important, which is what did Allah Azza wa Jal say? He didn't say to he said beware of them فَحَذَرُوهُمْ, but after that وَإِن تَعْفُوا, meaning be careful what you do and how. فَحَذَرُوهُمْ means be careful in how you respond in what you do. But the best thing that you could do is وَإِن تَعْفُوا وَتَصْفَحُوا, that you forgive. Right? Forgiveness is an extremely important part in marriage, and in not just marriage but amongst the children as well. Why? Because a lot of times the heart will, which is known as bughd and hiqd, that a lot of times the heart will carry reminiscences of things that happen, carry reminiscences of hatred, carry reminiscences of malice, of bad qualities, and this will be mentioned later on in the passage as well. But for a person to be able to successfully, right, successfully when a musibah comes in the family, to be able to handle it, the only way and the best way is that true, sincere forgiveness happen. And this takes a lot of effort. It's not easy, right? Because a person has to. Right, why is this being mentioned as the azima, as the higher, virtuous action? Right? Because you have to sacrifice something here. What is it you have to sacrifice? You have to sacrifice your ego and your opinion. Right? In order to forgive, you have to sacrifice your ego. And that's very difficult. So this is an extremely important ayah, not just in this specific context, which is that a person's, a family was opposing them from doing something of deen, but in general, because many times there are many feelings, right? If you're exposed to families and these things, you start to recognize this, that there are many feelings that are backed up. There are many kind of, many things that are still haven't been let go. And that if a couple or a family can let those things go properly, in the right way, right? Some people will let it go the wrong way by not caring or distracting themselves, right? For the people of kufr, alcohol is the best way, right? For people of iman, we as well have our own ways of distracting ourselves, but not necessarily solving the issue. Which is the best way to solve it then is to come into my heart first and to forgive, and then to build an environment of forgiveness in the family, so that we can teach each other to move on. Then we can teach each other to move on. And this is very difficult, but this is a very beautiful, very important ayah. And the next ayah, Allah Azza wa Jalla says, إِنَّمَا أَمْوَالُكُمْ وَأَوْلَادُكُمْ فِتْنَةٌ, that indeed your wealth and your family are a cause of temptation, fitna. وَاللَّهُ عِنْدَهُ أَجْرٌ عَظِيمٌ, yet Allah has a magnificent reward with him. Right? Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam himself, hugging and kissing Hussein radhiyallahu anhu, said that a child is mabkhalatun wa majbanatun, that a child is a means or a cause for a person to be stingy and greedy. And because they want to do anything they can do for their children, they will be stingy on other things, but they will do whatever they can for their children. وَمَجْبَنَةٌ, and cowardness, because a person will never be able to be brave, meaning go out in the path of Allah for the sake of Allah. They'll remember their children, things like this. But the idea being that, yes, family and wealth, which is a part of the test. Allah Azza wa Jal is not saying that these things are bad, but Allah Azza wa Jal is saying that these, everything has uh, a side to it. And the wealth, that you accumulate, that's much easier to understand how it's temptation. But your family as well, your children also bring temptation, right? This is why what's important always is to follow the akhlaq of deen, and to be on the straight path regardless of who is around you and what is happening. This is the way of the Anbiya alayhimus salatu wasalam, that regardless of what happens to anyone, which is what the next ayah then kind of points to, that fattaqullaha mastata'tum, that fear Allah as much as you can. Right? So now Allah Azza wa Jalla is giving us orders. Just do this. Fattaqullaha mastata'tum. Wasma'u wa ati'u. And listen and obey. Right? Allah Azza wa Jalla is telling us that I know what's better for you, so just listen and obey. Wasma'u wa ati'u wa anfiqu khayran li anfusikum. And spend what is good for you. Right? Sometimes spending is an important part of family, an important part of solving things. Sometimes you have to spend to bring love, right? And that's a part of it. وَمَنْ يُوقَ شُحَّ نَفْسِهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. And this is now a very, very important part of tazkiyah, which Allah rule qaida of tazkiyah, of purification of one's akhlaq, that Allah Azza wa Jalla is mentioning here, that whoever is safeguarded from the avarice of his own soul, then it is these who are truly successful. Shuhun nafs refers to greed of oneself, which is a very, very innate quality of people, right? It's from the onset. Shuh is there, greed is there, to want for yourself from the onset. And this is why the ulama say, right, that when discussing what is the first sin that had happened amongst mankind, some say that the quality goes back, the quality which is the cause for this is shuhun nafs, greed of the self, right? Some say takabbur, some say hasad, but some ulama say shuhun nafs, which is greed of the self, right? The child, when it's born, the first thing it wants is milk to fill its stomach, right? So naturally, if you see kids, they don't want to share their toys. This is mine, right? Where did that quality come from? Where did the child learn this? And it's so natural and normal. And we see it as an innocent thing, and yeah, it's an innocent thing, and they're kids, it's innocence there. But it's interesting because those qualities will grow, right? This is why Allah Azza wa Jal has given us akhlaq to be able to control our natural qualities, because our natural qualities aren't always good, right? We don't follow everything which is natural to us, because if you start following everything which is natural to you, then you'll be like animals. This is why akhlaq is supernatural. Akhlaq is outside of our nature, which makes akhlaq difficult, which makes akhlaq hard. Shuh is easy, to be greedy, to want something and to act upon it. Whenever a person wants to eat something, eat it. Whatever a person wants to eat, eat it. Whenever a person wants to do something, they do it, right? This is all shuh nafs. That's easy. But then akhlaq is what is above that now. And this is why people are responsible after a certain point of life, right? After a certain age. And they're not responsible before that time, because Allah Azza wa Jal gives a time limit for the aql, which is the carrier of akhlaq, to develop. When it's strong enough that the person does have the ability to use his aql to oppose his nature, then now that person becomes responsible, right? Mukallaf. That person now becomes responsible. So وَمَنْ يُوقَ شُحَّ نَفْسِهِ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. The person who is Now, Allah Azza wa Jal says, some of the ulama point to the word usage. Allah Azza wa Jal did not say, وَمَن يُزِيل, the one who removes, or the one who, destroys, or the one who gets rid of. Right? Allah Azza wa Jal said, وَمَن يُوقَى. And this is very beautiful wording, because Allah Azza wa Jal did not even say the person who defends, who protects himself, but the person who's protected. Right? So not a person who protects, because this is why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what would he make dua? He would say, Allahumma la takilni ila nafsi tarfata ayn. Oh Allah, don't make me responsible of myself. Don't give me my matters of myself to myself for even a moment. Meaning, oh Allah, you be responsible of me. You be my caretaker. Right? Because we do not have the ability to protect ourselves from ourselves. Right? So we have to be protected. How are we protected? Part of that comes from our efforts, and the other great part of that is from the fadl of Allah, the mercy of Allah, the grace of Allah, that Allah protects us. So Allah uses beautiful wording here, وَمَن يُوقَى, the one who's protected. Also, what this tells us is that shuhun nafs is not something that will go. Right? Greed that a person has in themselves is not a quality that a person can remove. It's a quality that you have to continuously try to protect yourself from, continuously fight against. It's not something that you can remove. These qualities will always be the reason why we have to make jihad. We have to struggle against ourselves. A person will never remove these qualities from themselves. Right? But the one who fights it and is protected from it, فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ, those people are successful. Inshallah, we'll conclude here and we'll finish the surah, inshallah, in the coming week. May Allah Azza wa Jalla grant us understanding of this and the ability to apply, and forgive us for any mistakes or shortcomings in our attempt to understand His perfect word. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Sadaqallahu al-azim. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka.